Hi, Jagadish. Thank you for your time. Uh,
Hello,
how are
nice
you?
to meet you. I'm doing well. How are you?
How's the weather there?
Weather is okay. It's still hot. Waiting for it to cool down.
Yeah, it must be pretty means morning for you, early morning for you, I think. It's for you.
Yeah, it's about not too early, but yeah, 8 o'clock.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So jumping right into the, in the session, I would like to ask you that your background, your story so far in the healthcare and biotech space.
Cool. So yeah, so I think my background, my PhD was more in the wireless communications information theory space, and I started my career off in the semiconductor industry almost 15 years ago now, and I was there for the first 4 or 5 years of my initial journey, and then I kind of shifted over to the navigation space, where I was again with a startup where we were trying to sort of complement GPS with a bunch of terrestrial positioning algorithms to be able to help like E911. So when somebody is stuck at like the basement of a parking lot and they have to call 911 and they cannot talk, they have to come and locate you, and GPS often fails in those challenging locations. So this startup was trying to see how they could best complement GPS and give them like a standardized 10-meter accuracy radius, and also like vertical information so that they could actually go find the people, right? So that's kind of where I was. So some personal experiences from my side, on my family side with the healthcare system. And then I started reading up a little bit more about like some of the methods and analyses used in medical image processing. And then I realized that there was like a lot of parallel happening between, techniques that I was using and versus what folks were using in like surgery or diagnostics or a lot of the imaging techniques, right? And then I just felt like that would be something that was more relatable for me, essentially because it's sort of closer to touching people's lives. Not that some of the other stuff I was doing was not, but this was just, it just felt a little bit more meaningful and gratifying to sort of gravitate towards that space, right? So, and then I started doing a little bit of sort of coursework. I tried to collaborate with a couple of professors at UC San Francisco, a bunch of hobby projects. But I think really my career took a pivot when I got into like striker endoscopy probably about 6 years ago now. And I think pretty much the deep learning wave that was happening, where computer vision, traditional computer vision was kind of being turned on its head with, like with a lot of the deep learning and the machine learning techniques that were coming through. I kind of latched onto that, if you will. And that's kind of how I got into that space. And then after that, being with Alphabet, where essentially there was a combination of surgical analytics work that I was doing, and also a bunch of sort of aging and diseases, manifestation of aging, where I was with the yeast lab working on some UK biobank data. So I think all of that together gave me a little bit more perspective on like real world data and what are the techniques that we want to be using. And so right now I'm with Tempus Labs as a director of imaging AI, where I direct the radiology and the cell imaging teams here. So the goal is really to be able to combine different data modalities effectively to be able to personalize or sort of provide precision medicine treatment recommendations to patients. That's kind of my story to where I am.
That's pretty interesting that you saw the parallel between geolocation and medical imaging. That's really amazing.
Yeah, I think to me, the biggest parallel to me was more just data in some sense, because in the traditional way of sort of working in the semiconductor space and navigation space, it was more about like how do you design a DSP algorithms, how do you get it working, how do you sort of reduce error rates and things of that nature, right? But kind of towards the end of my journey with NextNav, which was a navigation company I was with, we started looking at data coming from a lot of our towers, and we started sort of mining the data a little bit for like noise and jammers and things of that nature. And that's when I started realizing that there was a lot of pattern recognition work that was happening, both in the traditional or rather classical machine learning space, as well as some of the newer techniques that were coming up, right? So to me, that was like the bridge. I mean, the fact that this was also like sort of semi-big data, where essentially you were trying to mine for patterns and improve performance. And the same thing was kind of happening in the medical imaging space as well.
Right, right. So what are you seeing that broad challenge in overall healthcare AI space that you see?
Again, like I said, I want to kind of speak to the medical imaging space, maybe, because that's kind of where my most of my experience is. So the biggest challenge is that, like, I've been facing right from my alphabet times to now is just data. So I think it's all about like having the right kind of data. And I think it's a cliche now to say that you can have the fancy algorithm in the world, but if your data quality is not good, it's not going to happen. Whereas if you have really the right kind of data at scale and diversity that you care about, even the dumbest algorithm can do the job for you, right? I mean, that's kind of, and so we are somewhere in between where you have some data, there's some missingness, there is some noise, and you want to figure out, like, okay, what is it that can work, what cannot. So especially in the medical imaging community, I feel like the last couple of years, maybe things are changing a little bit, but there's always this sort of lack of understanding of where is the boundary between privacy and wanting to sort of advance science, right? So a lot of the clinicians, like surgeons, people we work with, everybody obviously wants to make treatment decisions better. They want to advance science. They want to push the envelope. But then they also have this thing at the back of their mind, like, okay, what kind of patient consent do I have? And even though patients consent for research, is it okay? Can I actually make a commercial product out of it using somebody's data and then deploy it in the real world and build $1 billion company out of it? And then, is that what the patient is consenting to, right? I mean, so there's a lot of gray area there in terms of figuring out, like, what are they really signing up for, and how can companies go and do it? I think. Again, I'm not a legal expert. I think a lot of people are like figuring that out and understanding how best to work with that data, but definitely work in progress in terms of, like, where we want to be in terms of the scale and the quality of the data.
Right. Yeah, but I can understand that there's so many concerns with the use of AI and with the privacy and all. So what do you think, Miss? What's your take that enterprises' understanding of AI and ML as a technology? Means some people have their different understanding around AI. Some find it very evil, some find it very useful. So what do you see as a technology? What healthcare community is seeing it is?
Yeah, so I can probably speak to it more from sort of a customer standpoint, if you will. I think so. There's both, right? From an enterprise standpoint, when the company is going out and building it, I think oftentimes it's now, so you have to say that your company is in AI, more or less, right? Everybody is doing it, and if you don't have that buzzword somewhere in your pitch deck, then you're doing something wrong, it looks like. But from a consumer standpoint, I think I have seen the broad spectrum from clinicians who come in and they're extremely skeptical of what AI is capable of doing, to the point where, I mean, there's also this sort of fear that is AI replacing the radiologist, the pathologist, whoever, right? I mean, there's kind of that aspect to it as well. And then there's the other end where they just expect an AI algorithm to walk into the operating room and just solve everything for them. They just think it's a magic wand you can wave and things will just work, sort of thing. So it's kind of the two ends, and just trying to sort of educate them as to, okay, what is really possible today with the kind of, because I mean, you show them a scene. The AI algorithm can barely differentiate the liver from the kidney from, that's the kind of algorithm status we are at. So it's, if you go and ask them, should I actually go resect the liver from this side or that side, or understand the tissue, and there's so much complexity there to understand the scene and actually recommend a treatment. I don't think it's quite there yet. So it's essentially trying to break down like the high level task into like little bite-sized pieces that we can teach the machine to sort of understand the scene and interpret it and give feedback back to the clinician, and then sort of build up the little pieces to eventually solve for like a more complex problem, right? So both the machine learning team understanding that and the user understanding that and converging on what exactly we want to be solving as a team, I think is critical. Because if you end up saying, oh, this is the latest model that DeepMind put out, I'm going to do it, and then you implement it, and then the surgeon is like, what have you done? I'm not going to use it. So it's essentially working coherently with them to understand what is it that they want to be solving, and then going ahead and trying techniques.
Right, right. So yeah, means generally what happens means AI helps the clinicians, the doctors to perform their job better.
Yeah.
That's the the idea that more people are pushing, and they're kind of liking it when they come to know that this is the technology. This helps them to perform the job, automate some of the tasks that they need to do while checking up a patient and all sort of stuff, means documentation and the medication and all. So means there's one thing that people find it very difficult. Means experimentation with the machine learning model is one thing, but while scaling up and building a production level, going to production level, there are challenges are different. So what is your challenge when you find and how you overcome that?
Yeah, so I think 100% going from like a training paradigm to like a broad inference paradigm where you want to be deploying at scale is a huge challenge. I think that's not just a challenge in healthcare. I think it's a challenge with all algorithms, right? So specifically with healthcare, I think because there's so much discussion about like bias in the data and diversity, lack of diversity in the data that you're training the model with. So usually if you look at like the way companies go about it, right? So they go and strike some sort of big partnership with a couple of different hospitals, like, and then so that's kind of how you get like let's say big data to train your algorithms or something.
Right.
But there is already an institutional bias in just doing that, right? So you essentially are kind of limiting yourself to those data sets where the surgeons are used to performing surgery a certain way, or they have a certain demographic of patients that always come to them. Maybe it's not fully representative of the, like the Hispanic population or the Asian population or whatnot, right? So just by introducing that institutional bias right at the outset, you're kind of already tailored your algorithm to that specific population and that specific instrumentation that is used in that hospital and so on, right? So being able to identify the right validation cohorts and being able to bring up bring in like the different sites with different demographics and different instruments and different qualities in the images, and having your algorithm tested on those and then reporting that in like a peer-reviewed journal really is like the holy grail of the whole thing, right? I think, and even if you want to eventually go to like an FDA submission or whatever, so that is the path that you have to take. So that is a huge lift, and so it's not just a huge lift from an algorithm side; it's a huge lift from a legal standpoint and an ops standpoint, and to be able to get data at that kind of scale, convince everybody that it's working. Because at the end of the day, a clinician is going to look at your numbers and alter a person's treatment plan, right? And and their career is on the line, the patient's life is on the line. I mean, there's so many things that, and they were like, why am I using your numbers, right? And so we have to be able to back it up for them to do that.
Right. Yeah, means that sounds means this humongous task to collect all those kind of data and train your model and build something that will work on the different demography that you discuss. Because every demography have different genes and those kind of stuff, and things get changes with the weather and whatnot. I can only imagine how complex and how many variables are there. So means while building this kind of solution, what do you think is the biggest gap in the product or a solution on which you use to build this kind of solution? So what is the biggest gap, if you can have any thoughts on it?
Biggest gap in terms of like what is out there, or give us biggest gap in terms of like the unmet need and the understanding from the enterprise? What the gap in what sense?
Well, so there are several solutions in the market, several product which companies and enterprises use to build this kind of product, AI and ML ops, and all of data training, data preparation, model training, model deployment. So do you means that's a technical problem? Means you in healthcare there's more challenging than the business problem is more challenging than the technical problem. But if you talk only about the technical problem, so do you see any gap in the market that product that are available are not up to the mark, or they kind of lack at somewhere? that not a robust product that you can use in your daily operation?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the like off-the-shelf tooling that's available, right? I mean, there's so many offerings from like AWS or GCP, or where they essentially give you easier ways to like build pipelines, create deployment containers, deploy them. There's a lot of sort of easy to use kind of tools that are available out there, right? But the challenge is really in being able to customize that for your specific need and being able to scale with that, right? So every application is different, every model is different, and so you have your own model monitoring requirements, you have your own hyperparameter space in which you're searching, and you have your own end validation metric that you care about, right? And so it may not be so it could very well be, especially in the medical space, a multi-stage machine learning model. So it's not like you look at an image and you let's say you are able to identify the tumor region correctly or whatnot, right? But the algorithm doesn't stop there. So what do you do with that identified tumor region? It's like, okay, you go and characterize it, and then you go and combine it with the genetic information of that patient, and eventually come up with like a predictor that says, okay, this is how this patient is going to respond to treatment or something like that, right? So that is the full chain. So if you look at it in sort of piecemeal, maybe the tools available out there are giving you like the best segmentation, monitoring, performance or whatnot, but maybe that is not really translating into performance at the treatment response level, right? So you want to be able to build something end to end to really care, but that end to end is different for different people, right? And different for different applications, different for different, even within our space, like it's each application that you want to deploy is different, right? So I feel like that is a challenge that we are still trying to understand and overcome in some ways. So like, how do you customize all of the tooling that is available? What do you build in-house? What do you leverage from what is out there? Striking that right combination. And then obviously it's the team size matters, the compute power matters, all of those come into play when you put all this together, right? So
Right.
from a pure deployment standpoint, that's kind of the gap I see. Like, where does research stop? Where does engineering begin? And is that sort of non-overlapping, or is there like a big overlap between who understands machine learning and who does engineering? Sort of thing. That's a boundary that we are trying to understand.
Right. So yeah, Miss, you have given so much insight in a very short time about your work and all in general about machine learning production level deployment and all. So one last question: how you see in next 5 years in your serviceable geography the AI adoption in terms of your user, in terms of enterprises, and in general audience? Means how you see it?
I
What's your
think
hope?
it's yeah. I mean, especially with the pandemic, I think you can see that there is a lot more sort of like teledoc applications, and people are starting to use like apps, like they have like doctor consultation via WhatsApp, whatnot, right? So I think generally I feel like this has a little bit of the data barrier has been broken down, in my opinion. Like how people deal with medical data and how they perceive medical data in general. So my sort of hope for this the next 5 years, as well as sort of where I think the trend is heading, is that there will be definitely broader acceptance in terms of like how do you start integrating with hospital systems, and and how do you effectively create de-identified data sets that you can do research on and publish, right? And I also feel like more recently the FDA came out with this breakthrough status application, where essentially you can come up with a proof of concept. So first of all, software is now recognized as a medical device, so that is a big step. So you don't have to have a physical device, it's just the software is recognized as a medical device. And then FDA came out with this breakthrough medical device status, where essentially you can take a data set and a validation set prove out your algorithm and immediately file to the FDA. And if they assign a breakthrough status to your algorithm, that opens a lot of doors for you. So you can basically go to hospitals and say, hey, look, we got the breakthrough status. Now we just want to show that thing can work at scale, and like put more resources into it. And because it's almost like a semi-guaranteed way of getting an FDA approved algorithm out into the market if they give you the breakthrough status. So I feel like with some of these things, again, AI healthcare is not the consumer space. So you will not see apps come out like every 3 months or every 6 months with new device. So it's not that. It's not going to happen. But just the fact that people are now more understanding of, okay, it is going to play a role. How can we contribute, and how can we do so while respecting like safety and privacy and all of that, I think is where this thing is heading. So
right. So I think you have put all and summarized everything in a very concise manner. So thank you for your time, Jagadish. We will hopefully talk more on this, and we'll see your progress in coming days and weeks. Thank you.
sure. No, thanks for having me. It was good talking to you.